The black ships came from the deep space like giant metal monsters. They were huge, bigger than cities, and covered with weapons that could destroy entire planets. The ships moved slowly through the darkness toward a small blue world called Earth. Inside the biggest ship, Admiral Vextar stood on his command bridge looking down at the planet below. Vextar was not human. He looked like a giant lizard that walked on two legs. His skin was thick and green like armor. His teeth were sharp like knives, and his claws could cut through steel. His red eyes glowed as he watched Earth spin slowly in the black space. He smiled, but it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had found easy prey. The Admiral had conquered many worlds before this one. His people were called the Hegemony, and they ruled most of the galaxy. For 3,000 years they had traveled from star to star, taking what they wanted. Every race they met became their slaves. Every planet they found became their property. They were the strongest beings in all the universe, and they knew it. Vextar looked at his officers who stood around the bridge. They were all like him, big and strong and dangerous. Their bodies were built for war. They could run faster than any human. They could fight longer without getting tired. Their weapons were more advanced than anything humans had ever dreamed of. This would be another easy victory. But something felt wrong to the Admiral. His sensors told him strange things about this planet Earth. There were no big space stations around it. No fleets of warships came to fight them. No messages begging for mercy came from the surface. The planet was quiet like it was sleeping. This made Vextar feel confused. Every other world had tried to fight when the Hegemony arrived. Some sent their best warriors to die in hopeless battles. Others tried to hide or run away. A few even destroyed themselves rather than become slaves. But Earth did nothing. It just waited. Maybe the humans were too stupid to know they were in danger, Vextar thought. Maybe they were too weak to build weapons. Maybe they were just animals that did not understand what war meant. The Admiral pushed his doubts away. It did not matter what the humans were thinking. Soon they would all be dead or in chains. Far below on the surface of Earth, Captain Lee Dong-wook stood in a deep underground room beneath the city of Seoul. The room was full of computers and screens showing the alien ships above. Soldiers worked quietly at their stations, watching and waiting. But unlike the aliens above them, the humans were not confused or worried. Dong-wook was a tall man with serious dark eyes. He wore the uniform of the Korean Defense Force and had spent 20 years preparing for this day. Around him, his officers worked with calm efficiency. There was no panic, no shouting, no fear. These were professional soldiers who knew their job. Lieutenant Park Min-ho sat at a computer terminal typing commands. His fingers moved quickly over the keys as he uploaded targeting data to hidden weapon systems around the world. The aliens thought Earth had no defenses, but they were wrong. Humans had been building weapons for decades, weapons the aliens could not see or detect. The weapons were hidden deep underground or disguised to look like normal buildings. Some were built into mountains, others were hidden under the ocean. All of them were connected to the command center where Dong-wook waited. All of them were pointed at the sky where the alien ships floated. Sergeant Kim Yoo-jin checked her rifle for the 100th time. She lay hidden in the ruins of an old building outside Seoul, waiting for the aliens to come down. She had been a sniper for 10 years and could hit a target from 2 kilometers away. Around the city, hundreds of other snipers waited in similar hiding places. The aliens thought they were predators coming to hunt helpless prey. They had studied human history and saw only wars and fighting. They thought this made humans weak and divided. They did not understand that all this fighting had made humans very good at one thing, killing each other, and anything else that threatened them. While the hegemony had grown comfortable from easy victories, humans had never stopped preparing for war. Every human child learned about the great battles of the past. They learned about soldiers who fought against impossible odds and won. They learned that sometimes the smaller, weaker fighter could defeat the bigger, stronger one if they were smart enough and brave enough. Colonel Park So-young moved through the subway tunnels beneath Seoul with her Special Forces team. The tunnels were dark and quiet, but they knew every passage, every hiding place, every secret way to move around the city without being seen. They had spent months mapping these tunnels, preparing for the day when they would need to fight an enemy from underground. Above ground, the city looked normal. People went to work and children went to school. But this was all an act. Every person in Seoul knew what was coming. Every family had a plan. Every building had hidden weapons or supplies. The entire city was a trap waiting to close. Major Choi Jin-woo studied satellite images of the alien fleet. He counted ships and weapons, trying to understand how the enemy would attack. He had fought in many wars, but never against aliens from space. Still, war was war, and enemies were enemies. The aliens might have better technology, but humans had something. More important, they had the will to never give up. General Nam Tae-ho looked at reports from around the world. Every country was ready. Every military unit was in position. The civilians had been moved to safe places underground. The trap was set, and now they just had to wait for the aliens to walk into it. The alien Admiral Vextar gave the order to begin landing operations. Thousands of small ships separated from the main fleet and started falling toward Earth like metal rain. Each ship carried 50 alien warriors armed with the best weapons the hegemony could build. They expected to land shoot a few primitive humans and claim another world for their empire. Captain Dong-wook watched the landing ships on his screens. He counted them and calculated where they would land. Everything was going exactly as they had planned. The aliens were doing exactly what humans wanted them to do. He picked up his radio and spoke one word to every human soldier on Earth. Wait. The landing ships got closer to the surface. In a few minutes, the real war would begin. But the aliens still did not understand what they were walking into. They thought they were hunting sheep, but they were about to learn that Earth was home to wolves. Very patient, very dangerous wolves, who had been waiting a long time for this moment. The first alien ship touched down in a valley outside Seoul, and the door opened. Alien soldiers marched out ready to kill. They had no idea they were about to become the hunted instead of the hunters. General Kraketh stepped out of his landing ship and breathed the air of Earth for the first time. He was even bigger than Admiral Vextar, with muscles like steel cables under his thick green skin. His armor made him look like a walking tank covered in weapons and sensors. Behind him, 1,000 of his best warriors formed ranks ready to march on the human city. The valley where they landed was quiet and empty. Rolling hills covered with grass stretched in all directions. There were no human soldiers to be seen. No weapons, no defenses. Just peaceful countryside that would soon run red with blood. Kraketh felt disappointed. He had hoped the humans would at least try to fight. The general sniffed the air through his helmet filters, searching for the smell of fear that always came from a conquered world. Instead, he found something else. Something that made his warrior instincts suddenly scream danger. The valley was too quiet, too empty, too perfect. It felt like a trap, but that was impossible. Humans were primitive creatures with simple weapons. They could not possibly threaten the mighty hegemony forces. Kraketh pushed his doubts away and gave the order to advance. His warriors spread out across the valley, moving toward Seoul. High above them, Sergeant Kim Yoo-jin lay perfectly still in her sniper nest. She had been motionless for 6 hours, waiting for this moment. Her rifle was trained on the alien generals, head ready to fire. Around the valley, 200 of her fellow snipers held similar positions, invisible to the aliens below. Yoo-jin had been the best marksman in the Korean army for 5 years. She could hit a moving target at 3 kilometers, in a snowstorm. The alien general walking slowly across the valley might as well have been standing still. She waited for the signal, knowing that this shot would start the real war. Captain Dong-wook watched the aliens through his surveillance cameras. They moved like they owned the world, stepping proudly across the grass. They had no idea they were walking through the crosshairs of 200 rifles. He lifted his radio and spoke one word. Execute. Eugene squeezed the trigger. Around the valley, 200 rifles fired at the same moment. 200 alien warriors dropped dead before they even knew they were under attack. The aliens' perfect formation dissolved into chaos as soldiers looked around, trying to understand what was happening. But the humans were not finished. Hidden artillery positions opened fire from the hills surrounding the valley. Shells fell like deadly rain, turning the landing zone into a hell of explosions and flying metal. The aliens' advanced shields held for maybe 30 seconds before overloading and failing. Kraketh watched his warriors die around him and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. Real cold fear that made his hands shake and his heart pound. These humans fought like ghosts, striking from nowhere and disappearing before his troops could respond. This was not the desperate fighting of cornered animals. This was the methodical work of professional killers. The alien soldiers tried to fight back, but they could not see their enemies. Every time they thought they had spotted a human position, more shots came from a different direction. The humans seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, moving through the landscape like deadly spirits. Lieutenant Park Min-ho watched the battle from his command post and allowed himself a small smile. The aliens were learning their first lesson about fighting humans. Superior technology meant nothing if you could not find your enemy. The human snipers had spent weeks learning every rock, every tree, every hiding place in this valley. More alien landing ships came down trying to reinforce their trapped comrades, but the humans were ready for them too. Hidden surface-to-air missiles rose from concealed bunkers, destroying half the ships before they could land. The survivors crashed in flames, adding to the chaos below. General Kraketh tried to organize his remaining forces, but it was impossible. His communications were being jammed by human electronic warfare units. His sensors could not penetrate the smoke and dust kicked up by the artillery barrage. His warriors were scattered and confused, leaderless, and afraid. For the first time in 3,000 years, a hegemony invasion force was being destroyed by primitive natives. The aliens who had conquered 100 worlds were learning what it felt like to be the hunted instead of the hunters. They did not like the lesson. Eugene fired her last shot and watched another alien officer fall. Then she melted back into the forest like smoke, disappearing before the enemy could locate her position. All around the valley, her fellow snipers were doing the same thing. They had done their job. Now it was time to vanish and prepare for the next phase of the war. By sunset, the valley was quiet again. 1,000 alien warriors had landed that morning. Less than 50 survived, and they were wounded, scared, and completely demoralized. The humans had struck like lightning and vanished like mist, leaving only death and destruction behind. Admiral Vexstar received the reports from the surface with growing disbelief. His elite invasion force had been massacred by primitive humans, using simple weapons. It was impossible, but it had happened. For the first time since the invasion began, he wondered if maybe his people had made a terrible mistake. Colonel Park So-young crawled through the dark subway tunnel beneath Seoul, moving as quietly as a cat. Behind her, 12 of the best Special Forces soldiers in Korea followed in single file. Above their heads, alien patrols searched desperately for human survivors, never knowing they were walking over the heads of their hunters. The aliens had taken control of most of Seoul after the disaster in the valley. They moved in large groups, now afraid to travel alone. They had learned that humans could appear anywhere at any time like deadly ghosts. But they still did not understand how the human resistance actually worked. So-young's team had spent 2 weeks mapping every tunnel, every sewer pipe, every forgotten passage beneath the city. They could move from one end of Seoul to the other without ever showing themselves to enemy sensors. The subway system, built decades ago, had become their secret highway. Her target tonight was an alien communication center set up in the ruins of City Hall. 20 alien technicians worked frantically to restore contact with their scattered forces, protected by 40 guards. They thought concrete walls and energy shields would keep them safe. They were about to learn they were wrong. Staff Sergeant Lee Jun-seok checked his explosives one more time. He had been a demolitions expert for 15 years and could bring down a building with surgical precision. The aliens had superior technology, but they did not understand human creativity. Jun-seok's bombs were packed with metal fragments from destroyed cars, turning each explosive into a devastating fragmentation grenade. The team moved through the basement of an old office building that connected to the subway tunnels. The aliens had sensors watching every street, but they never thought to look underground. Humans had been fighting in cities for centuries. They knew how to use every advantage the urban environment provided. So Young studied the alien position through a periscope that poked up through a storm drain. The guards were alert and well-armed, but they were watching the wrong directions. All their attention was focused on the streets and buildings around them. They never looked down at the ground beneath their feet. Jun-seok placed his charges in the basement directly under the communication center. The explosion would travel upward through the floor, destroying everything in the room above. The aliens would have perhaps 2 seconds to realize what was happening before they died. The demolition expert set the timer for 30 seconds. Then the team retreated to a safe distance. So Young counted down the seconds in her head, watching. The alien guards threw her periscope. They had no idea death was rising toward them from below. The explosion shook the entire block. The floor of the communication center vanished in a ball of fire and flying metal. The alien technicians and their guards disappeared in an instant, reduced to nothing by the carefully placed charges. Before the smoke even cleared, So Young's team was already moving to their next target. Across Seoul, similar attacks were happening every night. Human resistance cells emerged from hiding to strike at alien positions, then melted back into the shadows. They hit supply convoys, communication posts, guard towers, and fuel depots. Every attack was swift, precise, and deadly. The aliens tried to adapt by increasing their patrols and setting up checkpoints. But this only made things worse. More troops on the streets meant more targets for the human hunters. The resistance fighters knew every alley, every rooftop, every hiding place. They could strike anywhere and escape before the aliens could respond. Captain Lee Hya-jin coordinated the resistance from her underground bunker. She had been an intelligence officer before the invasion and understood how to fight a shadow war. Her job was to make sure every attack hurt the aliens as much as possible while keeping human casualties low. The psychological war was just as important as the physical fighting. Every successful attack was recorded and broadcast to resistance cells around the world. Humans everywhere watched their soldiers destroy enemies that had seemed invincible. Fear began to replace despair in the hearts of the conquered. Major Kim Woo-bin led a raid on an alien ammunition depot in the industrial district. His team used the old storm drain system to approach unseen, then attacked from 6 different directions at once. The explosion could be seen from space as thousands of tons of alien ammunition went up in flames. But the aliens were learning too. They brought in better sensors and more sophisticated tracking equipment. They started using aerial drones to watch the streets from above. They began targeting civilian areas, hoping to force the resistance into the open. The war was escalating, and both sides were paying a terrible price. Seoul was becoming a wasteland of burned buildings and empty streets. But the human resistance continued to fight, knowing that every alien they killed was one less monster threatening their world. General Nam Tai-ho watched the reports from his command bunker and felt a mixture of pride and sorrow. His people were fighting magnificently, but they were also dying in growing numbers. The aliens might be losing this battle, but they still had overwhelming superiority in numbers and technology. The real test would come when the aliens finally decided to stop playing games and use their full power against Earth. Then, humanity would discover if guerrilla warfare could stand against orbital bombardment and weapons of mass destruction. The hunt was just beginning, and the stakes could not be higher. Major Choi Jin-woo lay flat on his belly on the mountain ridge, watching the alien supply convoy wind through the valley below. 50 vehicles loaded with ammunition fuel and spare parts for the increasingly desperate hegemony forces. The aliens had finally learned to travel in heavily defended groups, but they still did not understand human patience. Jin-woo had been planning this ambush for 3 weeks, studying the convoy routes, timing the patrols, calculating wind patterns, and elevation changes. His strike team included 20 of the most dangerous soldiers in the Korean army, men and women who had volunteered for a mission they all knew would probably be their last. The convoy was massive. Armored trucks the size of houses moved in formation, protected by flying gunships and walking war machines. Energy shields flickered around each vehicle, deflecting small arms fire. Any normal army would have needed tanks and artillery to stop such a force. But Jin-woo's team was not a normal army. They were human beings fighting for their world, and that made them the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Sergeant Oh Da-yoon crouched beside the charges she had spent 3 days placing, in the cliff face above the convoy route. Each explosive was carefully positioned to bring down thousands of tons of rock at exactly the right moment. The aliens might have force fields, but they could not stop an entire mountain. The convoy entered the narrowest part of the pass, where steep cliffs rose on both sides. This was the killing ground Jin-woo had chosen. Here the aliens could not spread, out, or escape. Here they would learn what happened when humans got angry. Jin-woo raised his hand and his team tensed like coiled springs. Every soldier knew their job. Every weapon was aimed at a specific target. When his hand dropped, the mountains themselves would become weapons. The lead vehicle passed directly beneath Da-yoon's charges. Jin-woo dropped his hand and hell came to earth. The explosion was tremendous. Half the cliff face collapsed in a roaring avalanche that crushed the first 10 vehicles like tin cans. Tons of stone and debris filled the narrow pass, trapping the rest of the convoy in a perfect killing ground. As the dust cleared, Jin-woo's team opened fire from positions carved into the remaining cliff faces. Rocket-propelled grenades slammed into alien vehicles, while sniper fire picked off exposed crew members. The convoy that had seemed unstoppable minutes before was now trapped and helpless. The alien commander tried to coordinate a response, but his communications were jammed by human electronic warfare specialists. His flying gunships could not maneuver effectively in the narrow pass, and his ground forces could not see their attackers through the smoke and dust. For 30 minutes, the battle raged as the humans poured devastating fire down onto the trapped convoy. Vehicle after vehicle exploded in flames as their fuel and ammunition supplies detonated. The pass became a graveyard of twisted metal and alien bodies. But Jin-woo knew this victory would come at a terrible price. His team had revealed their position, and alien reinforcements were already on the way. Heavy assault units were converging on the pass, ready to crush any human resistance. Captain Lee Hai-jin received the battle footage in her underground command center and felt her heart both soar and break. The destruction of the convoy would cripple alien operations for weeks, but she knew what it would cost. Jin-woo's team would not be coming home. The recording spread across the planet within hours, carried by hidden communication networks to every human settlement. People everywhere watched their soldiers destroy an enemy convoy that had seemed invincible. For the first time since the invasion began, humans dared to hope they might actually win this war. But the alien response was swift and merciless. Admiral Vextar ordered every available ship to converge on the mountain pass. If the humans wanted to play guerrilla games, he would show them what happened when you attacked the hegemony. Jin-woo watched the alien reinforcements arrive and knew his time was up. Hundreds of enemy aircraft filled the sky, while armored divisions surrounded the base of the mountains. There was no escape, but he had never expected one. His team fought to the last bullet and beyond. When their ammunition ran out, they used captured alien weapons. When those failed, they fought with knives and bare hands. Sergeant Da-yun died trying to detonate one final charge. Lieutenant Park Jin-young kept firing his machine gun until alien plasma bolts finally silenced him forever. Jin-woo made his last stand at the edge of the cliff, looking down at the wreckage his team had created. An alien officer approached him, demanding surrender, but Jin-woo just smiled and pulled the pin from his last grenade. He died as he had lived, fighting for his world and his people. The aliens won the battle, but they had lost something far more precious. Their aura of invincibility was shattered. Across the galaxy, subject races watched the footage from Earth and began to whisper about rebellion. For the first time in 3,000 years, the hegemony faced the possibility that their empire might not last forever. The tide of war was beginning to turn, but the price in human blood was growing higher every day. The real test was still to come when the aliens finally decided to stop holding back and use their most terrible weapons against Earth. General Nam Tae-ho emerged from the ruins of Busan like a ghost rising from a grave. His uniform was torn and bloody, his face gaunt from weeks of fighting underground. Behind him, 300 survivors of what had once been a full division limped through the rubble. They looked like walking corpses, but their eyes still burned with unquenchable fire. The aliens had hammered Busan with orbital bombardment for 5 days, trying to crush the stubborn human defenders. Massive energy beams from space had turned Korea's second-largest city into a landscape of craters and twisted metal. The aliens thought they had finally cornered the human resistance and could finish them with overwhelming firepower. They were wrong. Tai-ho's soldiers had survived by going deeper underground than any alien commander thought possible. The old subway, tunnels, and basement complexes had become a fortress connected by passages dug with hand tools and desperate determination. While the aliens celebrated their victory above, the humans had been preparing their revenge below. Now they emerged to find the alien occupation force relaxed and off guard. The enemy soldiers had removed their helmets and were sharing victory drinks, thinking the battle was over. They died before they understood what was happening. Lieutenant Colonel Bae Soo-min led her rangers in a lightning assault on the alien command post, while Tai-ho's regular troops hit their supply depot. The aliens, caught completely by surprise, fell. Back in disorder as humans seemed to materialize from the very ground itself. The battle was over in minutes, but what the humans found in the alien prisoner compound changed everything. Inside the cages were not just human captives, but representatives of dozens of different species, all bearing the scars of hegemony slavery. An elderly creature with blue skin and silver eyes introduced herself as Speaker Valana of the former Confederation of Free Worlds. Her people had been the last major civilization to fall before the hegemony reached Earth. She carried with her data files that would transform the war. Tae-ho studied the intelligence reports with growing amazement. The galaxy was full of enslaved, races all waiting for someone to lead them in rebellion. The hegemony looked powerful, but they were spread thin across thousands of worlds. Their strength was an illusion, maintained by fear and the myth of invincibility. The files contained detailed information about hegemony military capabilities, their weapons technology, their fleet positions, and most importantly, their weaknesses. The aliens were not invincible gods, but mortal creatures with limitations and flaws like any other species. Captain Lee Dong-wook received the intelligence data in his command bunker and immediately began planning. Earth was not just fighting for its own survival, but for the freedom of the entire galaxy. The responsibility was overwhelming, but also inspiring. Humans had always been at their most dangerous when they had something greater than themselves to protect. The data revealed that the hegemony military was built around intimidation and quick victories. They had never faced a prolonged guerrilla war against a determined enemy. Their supply lines were vulnerable, their morale was brittle, and their commanders were overconfident. More importantly, the files showed that other enslaved races were already beginning to rebel. News of human resistance had spread across the galaxy, inspiring uprisings on a dozen worlds. The hegemony was facing challenges from multiple directions for the first time in centuries. Colonel Park So-young coordinated with resistance leaders on other worlds using captured alien communication equipment. She discovered that humans were not alone in their fight. On distant planets, other species were striking back against their oppressors, inspired by the example Earth had set. The war was no longer just about Earth. It had become a galaxy-wide revolution against 3,000 years of tyranny. The humans who had seemed like helpless prey were becoming the leaders of the greatest rebellion in galactic history. But the aliens were not finished. Admiral Vextar realized that Earth represented an existential threat to the entire hegemony. If humans succeeded in their resistance, other worlds would follow their example. The Empire would collapse into chaos and civil war. The Admiral made a fateful decision. He would commit everything to crushing Earth once and for all. Every available ship, every weapon, every soldier would be thrown against the human homeworld. Either the rebellion would end here, or the hegemony would fall, trying to stop it. Major Kim Woo-bin intercepted alien communications, revealing the massive buildup of enemy forces. Thousands of ships were converging on Earth carrying weapons capable of cracking planets. The final battle was coming, and it would determine the fate of the galaxy. Taeho looked at his exhausted soldiers and felt a mixture of pride and sadness. They had come so far and achieved so much, but the greatest test was still ahead. Soon every human on Earth would face a choice between freedom and extinction. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the small blue world that had dared to defy the hegemony could survive what was coming. The predators were about to reveal their true nature, but so were their prey. The final battle began at dawn as the sun rose blood-red over the ruins of Sol. Admiral Vextar had committed his entire remaining fleet to one last assault, bringing every ship down into low orbit to provide direct fire support. He would either crush the human resistance completely or die in the attempt. Colonel Park So-young stood on top of the rubble that had once been Namsan Tower, watching the alien fleet descend like falling stars. Around her, the last organized human forces prepared for what everyone knew would be the final stand. They were outnumbered 20-1, their equipment was failing, and they had no hope of reinforcement. But humans had never been good at accepting defeat gracefully. The alien ships filled the sky like a metal storm, their weapons charging for a bombardment that would turn Sol into glass. Vextar himself led the assault, determined to personally oversee the destruction of the species that had humiliated his empire. Captain Lee Dong-wook activated the weapons system he had spent months preparing in secret. Hidden fusion reactors throughout. Sol overloaded in a carefully timed sequence, creating electromagnetic pulses that fried alien electronics across the city. Computers crashed, weapons systems failed, and the mighty hegemony fleet found itself flying blind. Ancient subway tunnels, packed with every explosive the resistance could manufacture, detonated in a chain reaction that shook the entire city. Buildings, collapsed streets caved in, and entire neighborhoods disappeared into smoking craters. Sol itself had become a weapon turned against the invaders. The battle descended into a close-quarters nightmare as alien troops, stripped of their technological advantages, found themselves fighting humans on humanity's own terms. Every street became a fortress, every building a weapon. Civilians who should have been hiding instead emerged with improvised weapons to join the fight. Sergeant Kim Yoo-jin made her final shot from the ruins of Lotta World Tower. Her bullet found its mark in Admiral Vextar's skull just as alien plasma fire reduced her position to ash. She died knowing she had killed the architect of Earth's invasion with her last round. General Nam Tai-ho led a desperate charge against the alien command center, fighting with a broken rifle and a combat knife. He fell just meters from his objective, but his sacrifice allowed Lieutenant Park Min-ho to reach the alien communication array and broadcast a final message to the galaxy. The message was simple, but its impact was tremendous. Earth still fought. Humanity would not surrender. The rebellion lived on. Across the galaxy, enslaved races heard those words and rose up in revolt. Hegemony governors found themselves facing uprisings on hundreds of worlds simultaneously. The empire that had ruled for 3,000 years began to collapse as its foundation of fear crumbled. On Earth, the battle raged for 3 days as humans and aliens fought among the ruins with savage desperation. Neither side asked for quarter, and none was given. The streets ran red with blood from both species as the fate of the galaxy was decided in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Major Choi Jin-woo died defending a hospital full of wounded civilians using his body as a shield against alien grenades. Colonel Bae Soo-min fell while leading a counterattack that saved 300 refugees trapped in a collapsed subway station. Captain Lee Hye-jin spent her last bullets buying time for children to escape before alien claws tore her apart. But for every human who fell, they took aliens with them. The hegemony forces that had conquered 100 worlds found themselves bleeding to death in the rubble of Seoul. Their superior technology could not save them from human determination and fury. Their advanced weapons meant nothing when humans fought with kitchen knives and broken bottles. In the end, it was not tactics or strategy that decided the battle. It was simple savage will. Humans refused to break, refused to yield, refused to die quietly. They fought with a fury that shocked even the predatory hegemony, turning what should have been an easy conquest into a nightmare of blood and fire. When the smoke finally cleared, both sides had paid a terrible price. Seoul was gone, reduced to radioactive ash. Millions were dead on both sides. The alien fleet was destroyed, but so was most of the human resistance. The battle was over, but nobody had truly won. Yet in the smoking ruins, something remarkable happened. Human survivors began to emerge from their hiding places carrying weapons and equipment stripped from alien corpses. They had learned to use hegemony technology. They had captured alien ships. Most importantly, they had proven that the galaxy's apex predators could be beaten. The news spread across the stars carried by fleeing alien survivors and hidden resistance networks. On 1,000 worlds, enslaved races looked up at the sky and dared to dream of freedom. The hegemony empire began to crack as rebellion spread from planet to planet. Earth had been invaded by creatures who thought they were the ultimate predators. They had come to hunt easy prey and claim another world for their empire. Instead, they found something they had never encountered before in 3,000 years of conquest. They found humans. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of the hegemony was ending, and a new age was beginning. An age where the hunters had become the hunted, and the prey had revealed themselves to be the most dangerous predators of all. The war was far from over, but the tide had turned. Humanity had looked into the face of extinction and laughed. They had faced impossible odds and emerged bloodied but unbroken. Most importantly, they had shown the galaxy that even the mightiest empire could fall if enough people were willing to fight for their freedom. The aliens had thought they were coming to hunt sheep. They discovered they had walked into a den of wolves. Very patient, very angry wolves who had been waiting a long time for someone to make the mistake of threatening their home.